All over the world, thousands of people form deep, unbreakable bonds with inmates facing life-ending sentences, without ever meeting them in person. But why do some women fall for men sentenced to the ultimate punishment? What draws them in? Obsession, redemption, or something even darker? In this video, we'll explore the chilling stories of women who risked everything for a love the world told them was impossible. This is Tina Gonzalez, a former corrections officer from Fresno County. Her arrest and sentencing made headlines after authorities uncovered her year-long secret affair with an inmate. Even seasoned law enforcement officers were stunned by the details of her actions. Assistant Sheriff Steve McComas had seen a lot in his 26 years with the department, but he said Gonzalez's case was one of the worst. Investigators revealed that she had intentionally cut a hole in her uniform to make it easier to be intimate with an inmate, while 11 others watched. Her career, her reputation, even the safety of her colleagues, everything was at risk. What she did went way beyond an inappropriate relationship. She smuggled in a cell phone, razor blades, and even shared sensitive jail information, like when searches were happening and who was coming into the inmates' housing area. She didn't just break the rules, she put her fellow officers in real danger. Did she fully understand the risks, or did she simply not care? When Gonzalez was arrested in December 2019, investigators discovered she was still in contact with the inmate, even after being taken into custody. Recorded calls didn't just expose their ongoing communication. They revealed explicit conversations where she openly bragged about what she had done, showing no sign of regret. At her sentencing, Gonzalez stayed silent, letting her attorney speak for her. He claimed she was dealing with personal struggles, especially issues in her marriage. But prosecutors didn't buy it. They argued that what she did wasn't just a moment of poor judgment. Judge Michael Idiart didn't downplay the seriousness of her actions. He made it clear to Gonzalez that she had not only destroyed her own career, but also put her coworkers in danger with a reckless choice. Still, he believed in second chances. Instead of the maximum 16-month sentence, he gave her 210 days in jail, a decision that left room for redemption. With the time credits, she could be out by October. This case brings up serious questions about corruption in correctional facilities. An officer sneaking in contraband and getting involved with an inmate isn't just breaking the rules. It's a massive betrayal of trust. Gonzalez said she was struggling personally, but the fact that she kept the relationship going even after getting caught makes you wonder if there was more to it than just that. This is Vicki White. She was a respected assistant director of operations at the Lauderdale County Detention Center in Alabama. For years, she was known as a dedicated officer who followed the rules and worked tirelessly. But in 2022, everything changed. Vicki shocked her colleagues, friends, and family when she helped a dangerous inmate, Casey White, escape from prison. Their story became a nationwide manhunt, ending in tragedy. Casey White was no ordinary inmate. He was already serving a 75-year sentence for a violent crime spree in 2015, which included an attempted deadly attack, forced abduction, and mistreatment of animals. In addition to those crimes, he was awaiting trial for the 2015 murder of Connie Ridgway, a case he had initially confessed to. So, how did a man with such a brutal past manage to gain someone's trust, let alone their love? Despite his violent past, Casey had a reputation among some as being polite and charming. At some point, Vicki and Casey developed a secret relationship. Investigators later discovered that Casey had been in contact with Vicki through a secret phone number over 1,000 times in 2 years. Other inmates noticed Casey receiving special treatment, like extra food and privileges no one else had. Vicki, who was known for her kindness, had fallen for him. At this point, there was no turning back. Before their escape, Vicky took several steps that raised suspicion in hindsight. She sold her house for far below market value, withdrew a large amount of cash, and told colleagues she planned to retire. Then, on April 29, 2022, she put her plan into action. She told her co-workers she was taking Casey to the courthouse for a mental health evaluation. Because of her position, she was in charge of coordinating prisoner transport, so no one questioned her. But there was no scheduled court appointment. Instead, she drove Casey away from the facility, abandoning the patrol car in a parking lot and switching to another vehicle. For 11 days, Vicky and Casey were on the run. Authorities tracked them to Indiana after receiving tips about a suspicious Ford F-150 at a car wash. Surveillance footage confirmed Casey was the driver. Eventually, investigators found the couple hiding in a Motel 6. When they left the hotel, police pursued them in a high-speed chase that ended in a crash. Casey surrendered immediately, but Vicky suffered a gunshot wound to the head. When officers reached the vehicle, Casey reportedly told them, "Please help my wife." She just shot herself in the head. However, the two were not legally married. Vicky was rushed to the hospital, but she died from her injuries. The coroner later confirmed that she had taken her own life. Casey was taken back into custody and sentenced to life in prison without parole. In exchange for his guilty plea for the escape, prosecutors dropped a serious criminal charge related to Vicky's death. Vicky White's story is one of the most shocking cases of a law enforcement officer betraying her duty for love. This is Leah Roger, a 32-year-old activist fighting against the death penalty. How can activism against the death penalty actually lead to marrying a death row inmate? Well, she recently married Richard Glossop, a man who has spent more than 25 years on Oklahoma's death row. Their wedding wasn't in a church or a courthouse. It happened inside the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, where Glossop, now 59, has faced his final sentence 3 times and come dangerously close to losing his life each time. Roger is a law student and paralegal from Florida who has spent over a decade fighting against the death penalty. She never set out to fall in love with a man on death row, but her bond with Glossop grew in ways she never expected. So, how did it all start? Well, with a simple Christmas card. That single message led to more letters, long phone calls, and eventually a connection that neither of them could ignore. After surviving 3 failed sentences and now possibly facing a 4th, Rich has learned not to take anything for granted, Roger said. "We both try to appreciate every moment we have, and that's why it felt so important to make this commitment now." Richard Glossop has spent years awaiting his sentence and has insisted he had nothing to do with the 1997 planned crime that led to his conviction. His case has caught the attention of people around the world, including actress Susan Sarandon and spiritual advisor Sister Helen Prejean, who have publicly supported him. The prosecution's case largely depended on the testimony of Justin Sneed, the man who was directly responsible for the crime. Sneed avoided the death penalty by testifying against Glossop and is now serving a life sentence. While it's rare for people on death row to marry, it's not unheard of. Infamous criminals like Ted Bundy and Richard Ramirez also married while incarcerated. In Oklahoma, prison weddings take place twice a year, but there are no conjugal visits. Roger and Glossop were allowed to hold hands and share a brief kiss during their ceremony. Glossop has been down this road before. This isn't his first time exchanging vows from behind bars. He was previously married in 2018, but that relationship ended in divorce last year. While their marriage has drawn public interest, Roger says that's not what this is about. "I'm a private person," she explained. "This isn't about making headlines. It's about his innocence. He's already lost 25 years of his life." Now, Glossop continues to fight for his freedom while also challenging Oklahoma's lethal injection method in court. Meanwhile, Roger remains by his side, determined to support him through whatever comes next. This is Sandy, a 47-year-old mother of two from Somerset, England. She's been married twice before, but this time her wedding was far from traditional. In the video from her big day, she is dressed in a classic white gown, holding a bouquet, smiling for the camera. But there's one thing missing. Her husband, Charles Chucky Mamou, wasn't there. He was over 4,000 miles away, sitting on death row in Texas. Chucky was found guilty of taking 2 lives during a drug-related incident, a crime he says he didn't commit. Texas has some of the strictest rules for death row inmates, which meant Sandy couldn't even stand next to him on their wedding day. Instead, his father took his place and handed her the ring as they exchanged vows in front of a pastor. Their marriage didn't last long. Just 4 months later, Sandy discovered that Chucky had been sending explicit letters to a married woman in the UK. Feeling betrayed, she ended the relationship. Despite this, Sandy continued writing to inmates and, over time, built connections with several. At one point, she had as many as 30 prison pen pals. Eventually, she fell in love again, this time with 28-year-old Reginald Blanton. Reginald was on death row for a firearm-related incident involving his friend, though he insisted he was innocent. Like Chucky, he had spent years fighting his conviction. Despite being 19 years apart in age, he and Sandy believed their connection was real. Their relationship grew through countless letters and the rare moments they could spend together during her annual visits. But time was running out. Reginald had exhausted all his appeals, and his execution was now inevitable. Sandy knew she couldn't stop it, but she was determined to be there for him until the very end. Now, let's meet Michaela. She is a 43-year-old mother of 3 from Essex, England, who has been through 2 marriages and divorces. Now, for the past 18 months, she's been in a relationship with Jody Lee Miles, a man on death row in Maryland. Jody has spent 12 years on death row for the fatal incident involving a musical theater director, a crime that shocked many. He admits to pulling the trigger but insists it was in self-defense. Michaela believes his side of the story, standing by him despite the weight of his conviction. She has always been fascinated by prisons, and while researching online, she was shocked to learn that the death penalty still exists in the U.S. Disturbed by this, she started writing letters to inmates as a gesture of friendship. She never intended for it to turn romantic, but over time, she developed feelings for Jody. 18 months later, they were engaged. Michaela kept her relationship with Jody a secret from her daughters, who are now 22 and 12. She only told them the truth after getting engaged. Her youngest daughter is supportive and even close to Jody, but her eldest is struggling with the news. She feels hurt that her mother kept it from her and worries about how Michaela will cope if Jody's sentence is carried out. Michaela and Jody talk on the phone every day, trying to hold on to a sense of normal life. She lets him listen to the sound of bathwater running, or the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, small things that make him feel connected to the outside world. Sometimes they don't even need words, just sitting in silence is enough. But Michaela admits it's not easy. She spends her days waiting for his calls, feeling stuck in a world that revolves around someone she's never even met in person. This is Marie Waller, a 25-year-old youth corrections officer from Phoenix. She had been on the job for less than a year when she was arrested and charged with inappropriate relations with a person in custody, a serious offense. Court records show that Waller began a sexual relationship with an 18-year-old parolee who had recently been released from prison. He was staying in a group home meant to help young offenders adjust to life outside. Even though he was legally an adult, Waller was a corrections officer, which made the relationship against the law. The case came to light when another corrections officer reportedly saw explicit Snapchat messages exchanged between Waller and the parolee. Suspicious of the nature of their communication, the officer reported the findings, leading to an investigation. When Waller was questioned by authorities, she initially cooperated. However, during the interrogation, she requested a break to use the restroom. Investigators later discovered that during this break, she used her Apple Watch to send a message to the parolee, warning him about the investigation and instructing him to deny everything and delete any incriminating evidence from his phone. Despite her attempts to interfere with the investigation, Waller eventually admitted to the relationship. She claimed it was consensual, but due to her position of authority over the parolee, the law does not recognize consent in such situations. The nature of her job meant she held power over the individual, making the relationship legally and ethically unacceptable. The case is now under review by the county attorney, and Waller may face additional charges beyond the initial felony charge. If convicted, she could serve time in prison and be barred from working in law enforcement or corrections in the future. This incident raises serious concerns about professional boundaries within correctional facilities and the vulnerabilities of individuals in custody. Authorities emphasize that such relationships undermine the integrity of the justice system and compromise the rehabilitation process for parolees. This is Gemma, a former corrections officer whose life took an unexpected turn. Not long ago, she was the one enforcing the rules, making sure inmates stayed in line. Now, she's the one behind bars, living the reality she once controlled. At 28, Gemma was a well-respected officer at the Sinclair County Sheriff's Office. She had built a solid reputation, but everything changed when she got too close to a young female inmate. What started as harmless conversations inside the facility slowly blurred the lines between professional and personal, leading her down a path she never expected. Gemma first met the inmate the year before. At first, she kept her distance, not wanting to blur any lines outside of work. But everything changed when the inmate was granted a daily work pass. Wanting to be kind, Gemma gave her phone number, thinking it was no big deal. The calls started soon after, small requests at first. A ride to work here, a quick favor there, nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. Then came a bigger ask. Instead of using the jail's facilities, the inmate wanted to shower at Gemma's place during lunch breaks. It felt like a harmless gesture, just helping someone out. So, she said yes, but the authorities didn't see it that way. They argued that even if there was no pressure, an inmate could never freely agree to a relationship with a corrections officer. The sheriff, who originally hired Gemma, didn't mince words. Any relationship between an officer and an inmate was an abuse of power, no exceptions. When the case went to court, Gemma faced serious charges, including inappropriate misconduct. She swore there was never a physical relationship, insisting that everything she did came from a place of kindness, not manipulation. But the law doesn't always care about intentions. It only sees the line that was crossed. She was given a choice: take a plea deal with a reduced sentence or risk years behind bars if the jury didn't believe her. Afraid of losing everything, she took the deal. In the end, she was sentenced to 10 months with 5 to be served in prison. Looking back, Gemma wishes she had never crossed that line, but she insists she was manipulated. She believes the inmate, who had a history of fraud, saw her as nothing more than a tool for personal gain. The sheriff in charge of the jail says this kind of thing happens more often than people think. Inmates have everything to gain, while officers like Gemma have everything to lose. Now, she's living with a criminal record and the lifelong burden of being registered for an inappropriate relationship. Her advice to any officer tempted to cross the line? Run, it's not worth it. This is Casey Rush, a woman who never imagined falling in love with someone behind bars. But that's exactly what happened. Her husband, Travis, is serving 2 life sentences without the chance of parole, convicted of taking a life, unlawful confinement, and breaking into a home back in 1998. Despite it all, Casey believes he's innocent and has spent years fighting for his freedom. When Travis was convicted, Casey had no idea who he was. She was just living her life, completely unaware that this stranger would one day turn her world upside down. Travis, on the other hand, had already spent over a decade behind bars. Prison had changed him. Hope was fading, and the years were wearing him down. Then, in 2010, Casey came across his profile on an appeal website. She wasn't searching for love or trying to prove his innocence. She was just curious. Something about his case made her pause, and before she knew it, she was writing him a letter. She didn't expect much, just a response, maybe some insight into why he still claimed he was innocent. She didn't believe him, but she wanted to understand his side of the story. Travis wrote back, and at first it was just curiosity. But as the letters kept coming, their conversations got deeper. 3 months passed, and Casey couldn't ignore the pull she felt anymore. She had to see him. The drive to the prison was long and brutally hot, and the whole way there she kept wondering if she was making a mistake. But the moment their eyes met for the first time, everything shifted. The connection was real, and somehow, even with prison walls between them, love found a way to grow. Back in 2012, after just a few in-person visits, Casey and Travis tied the knot. The ceremony wasn't in a fancy venue or surrounded by loved ones. It happened inside the prison, with only Casey's daughter there to witness it. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding most people imagine, but for them, it meant everything. Still, their challenges were just beginning. They weren't allowed any time alone, and for the first 5 years, even something as simple as holding each other wasn't possible. Everything changed in 2017 when the laws around conjugal visits changed, finally giving them a night together. It was a turning point for their marriage. Before that, the distance had nearly broken them, pushing them to the edge of divorce. But just being in each other's arms, even for a little while, gave them the strength to keep going. Despite their love, Casey has faced judgment from family and friends. Her daughter struggled to accept the relationship at first, but has since come around. Still, Casey refuses to back down. She truly believes the justice system failed Travis, and she's determined to keep fighting for his freedom. Their 4th appeal is still pending, but the odds aren't in their favor. Travis is serving a life sentence with no way out. Even so, Casey won't let go of hope. She dreams of the day they can finally be together, living a normal life beyond prison walls. This is Sigrid, who fell in love with a death row inmate named Alan. It all began when she decided to write to a prisoner, not out of curiosity, but because she believed in second chances. She had always been against the death penalty and wanted to bring a little kindness to someone the world had forgotten. That someone was Alan. Alan had spent 15 years behind bars, 12 of them on death row for a conviction of taking a life. When Sigrid first sent him a letter, she never imagined how much he would change her life. What started as a simple exchange of words turned into something much more. They wrote back and forth, pouring out their thoughts, dreams, and fears. Before they knew it, feelings got involved, and their connection grew deeper than either of them expected. When they realized they were falling for each other, panic set in. This wasn't just a prison romance. It was long distance too, with Sigrid living all the way in Europe. They tried to cut ties, convinced it wouldn't work. But after 6 weeks of silence, Alan couldn't take it anymore. He picked up a pen and wrote the only words that truly mattered. "I love you." That was it. They couldn't hide their feelings anymore. A year later, Alan got down on one knee and Sigrid didn't hesitate. She said yes. Their wedding wasn't in a grand hall or a scenic garden. It happened inside the prison, behind bars, in a place most people would never picture for their big day. Alan poured his heart into his vows, telling her how much she meant to him, how he wanted to love her for the rest of his life, even if they could never have a normal marriage. The photos from that day are bittersweet. They remind her of the love they share, but also of the life they can't fully have together. Not everyone was happy for them. Sigrid's family and friends struggled to accept her choice. Some cut ties completely. Others told her they were afraid for her. She understood their concerns, but what hurt most was feeling abandoned by people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. Marriage to a death row inmate isn't easy. Phone calls are rare, visits are short, and every goodbye is heartbreaking. But they made it work. And then, something unexpected happened. Sigrid got pregnant. Alan wouldn't be there to watch their child grow, and that reality was painful. She sends him videos, but it's not the same. Still, she's determined to make sure their son knows his father isn't just the crime people associate him with. He's a man who loves deeply, who cares, and who, despite everything, has given her happiness. Sigrid knows people judge her, but she doesn't care. Love doesn't always make sense, and for her, this love is worth it.